It's the same name, but it is a slightly different product. Hey there, this episode of Some Gadget Guy is brought to you by viewers like you, all of the incredible people sharing content across social media, and the awesome generosity of my patrons at patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. More info on those fantastic nerds later in the video. Alright, the folks at Geekom sent this my way for me to test drive, share some thoughts. This is the Geekom A5, which is a product name we've covered in the past, but this is a refreshed box for 2025. The A5 2025 is visually the same mini PC form factor as before. I'm hoping this is contributing to cost savings and maybe keeping prices in check for consumers at a time where electronics are a little inconsistent. Unpredictable what might be happening in this market right now. And the nice thing for me is I could put in some B-roll from my first A5 review and you probably wouldn't notice. The outside is the same, but the inside is a bit different. Now, I'll pop out some specs on the screen here, but this is aiming to be a good, solid, affordable, all-rounder home PC. I am a huge fan of these little Nook style cases. They're so versatile, you can put them anywhere. It comes with a mounting bracket so you can stick it to the back of a monitor or a TV. And then we take a good laptop style chip, put it in this tiny shell, and we have a home mini PC ready to rock. And consumers can sometimes save some cash because an older laptop chip can still be a fantastically capable system today. For example, we can have more ports on a box than on most laptops. This is multi-display ready, out of the box, 2 dedicated HDMI and 2 USB-C with display port support. Not only Ethernet, but 2.5 gigabit per second Ethernet. A couple of USB-A's back here and a couple of USB-A's up front, and I'm happy to see the SD card slot still on the side. There have been a few other mini PCs where even when the motherboard has that slot, the case sometimes covers that. I'm never quite sure why manufacturers do that. Now, cracking the A5 open is just as easy as it was before. 4 feet with screws, and you pop this cage out where we can add another SATA SSD. The A5 comes with Windows 11 pre-installed on a 512 gig M.2 drive and with 16 gigabytes of RAM in a 2x8 gig stick configuration. Quad-posit RAM and SSD. Now, I've seen these parts in several other mini PC builds. I'm not sure they carry the same reputation as Western Digital or Crucial components, but I also haven't personally run into any issues with these parts. I would imagine if you're shopping a good home or student PC, these kinds of components aren't going to be run as hard as someone shopping a more robust and expensive workstation solution. There's an AW, an Azure Wave wireless card. Again, not an Intel or MediaTek part that I'm more familiar with. I got solid reception on my home network. I think the antennas on the A5 are better than the antenna placements on some of the other boxes I've recently reviewed, so my reception was pretty strong. And of course, you can always switch over to 2.5 gig Ethernet if you need a more reliable and faster connection. And it's while we're talking about the internals that we can shift to talk about performance. The new A5 is a very different machine than the older A5. The original A5 used an AMD chip, the 5800H. The newer A5 also uses an AMD chip, the 7430U. If you're a silicon nerd, you already know where I'm going with this. But for folks who aren't as familiar with AMD's alphabet soup, that first number in the AMD part is a generation number. The 7430 is 2 generations newer than the 5800. But the second number is kind of a performance tier. The 8 in 5800 is higher than the 4 in 7430. So we have a newer chip, but ranked at a lower tier of performance. The 5800H was built for more expensive, higher performance laptops of its era. The 7430U was built for more affordable mid-ranger laptops. So we shouldn't be too surprised that the newer A5 is not as powerful as the older A5, both in synthetic tests like Geekbench and in practical tests like file compression and video rendering. I don't think this system is really being positioned as a gaming solution, but this is a box that can play some PC games. I still like to test with Tetris Effect because you need to keep that frame rate stable to play Tetris. You cannot keep this at 60 frames per second at the highest graphics setting, so you will need to dial that down. Ditto an older game like Control. 720p at a lower graphics mode, and we can keep a pretty playable frame rate. But it's immediately going to struggle if we start trying to bump up the resolution or the graphics quality, and none of these ports around the box are going to give us that Thunderbolt throughput, so we could maybe add an external GPU or some kind of solution like that. It's not going to be that kind of computer. A box like this is incredible though at little lower power indie games, arcadey titles like Shredder's Revenge, plenty capable at hanging with classic console emulation. That's where I think this refresh is kind of interesting. It is not a gaming PC, and that's not the point. And even moving down in terms of performance tiers, this is still an overkill powerful system for daily computing tasks. It chews through the basic stuff really nice. Hook it up, go multi-monitor, great for chewing up documents and spreadsheets. Surfing the web is obviously well handled. Streaming content, I would not recommend it for heavy video editing, but it is plenty powerful at slicing up some home movies in 4K, and your render times will not be absurd on DaVinci Resolve. It performs better than I was expecting it to, given the difference in CPU from the original A5. And I think Geekom has acknowledged that change properly in terms of price. In an age of market and component instability, rising prices for a lot of our consumer electronics, I can see where some might be concerned this A5 is less powerful, but it also costs over $100 less. Right now, at the time I shot this, on sale prices, this is a solid performer that costs under $300. I think looking at price to performance, that seems reasonable, as there is a huge variety of older systems out there at around $300. It could be 8th or 10th gen Intel Core i5s, or some boxes with lower performance N100s. But opposite the original Geekom A5, the other big change is a much smaller and lower power brick, going from an external 120 watt power supply to a 65 watt peak power supply. This change, I think, benefits a lot of consumers out there, as yes, this box is less powerful, but it also literally consumes less electricity. Even in heavier lifting situations, it is incredibly rare that I can get this box to spin up its fans to the loudest level. Again, talking about rendering 4K video, and the fans are kind of at medium. Situations where fan noise was much more readily heard on the original A5. If we're considering the home and work applications, I think sacrificing some of the top-end performance to get to a lower price is a reasonable trade-off for the folks who will want a significantly quieter machine. For people who want that extra horsepower, Geekom offers a newer A6 that has a beefier 800 tier AMD chip, better graphics performance, twice the RAM and storage, for $140 more. That new A6 manages to stay really close to the price of the original A5, even with that small generational CPU upgrade. Those last points, it's something I think is kind of special about the mini PC market right now. There's a lot of overlap between different kinds of CPUs and GPUs, performance at different prices. The compromises of using a slightly older chip, it's not something I think many people are going to feel. When I was considering some of my concerns here, I was a little anxious that this older chip doesn't have one of those newer NPUs, but those aren't being supported by a lot of programs just yet. So in the near term, and maybe even in the medium term, I just don't feel that's going to be front of mind for someone shopping a good daily driver home PC today. It should not cost a lot of money to get a punchy little system with a lot of upgrade potential that now runs quieter than it used to. So I will, of course, leave some links down below where you can find more information on the new A5 for 2025. As always, thanks so much for watching, for subscribing to the channel, and sharing this content across social media. The sharing is really becoming the most important part these days. It's really fun digging into new systems and refreshes and taking a look back. Maybe an older component is still gonna do you just fine today, and that's gonna be a little bit less of a hit for your wallet. So the folks who get to see all the results of my testing and reviewing and comparisons first are, of course, my amazing patrons. All of the folks folks over on patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. This list of names scrolling by on your screen right now, a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart, as these are the folks who are literally helping to keep the lights on here in the Gadget Lab. None of my editorials, articles, reviews, none of it would be possible without their generosity and support. That, and they're just really fun to talk to. They do help shape the future of my content on this channel, so I hope you'll consider checking them out. I hope you'll consider joining the community at patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. Now, you know where you can find me across the rest of the internet, at SomeGadgetGuy, basically everywhere, but these days, I'm trying to spend a bit more time on the Mastodons, a little on the Blueskis, but a lot less so on the Threads and the Facebooks and the Instagrams, and none at all on that dumpster fire site, and I will catch you all on the next review.